Well, good morning, gang, and welcome again to this week's Morning Coffee and a Thought brought to you by Wings of Faith Ministries here in Sarnia. You know, the Old Testament of our Bible is just full of weird and wonderful stories, stuff that happens that you just don't see every day. And yet the Apostle Paul tells us that these stories were saved and these accounts preserved and serve as examples for us today. They're very relevant. And so today we want to look at a couple of stories. They're both a little bit weird, something you don't see every day, that involve two characters that are linked together. And we'll take a look at these stories and how two people were talked out of God's best for them by other people or by their own insecurities. We'll get back to our stories in just a moment. But first of all, I want to remind you that Morning Coffee and a Thought can be seen every Friday beginning at 1 o'clock on our YouTube channel and on Sunday mornings on our Facebook page beginning at 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings. We hope you will join us. And if these thoughts or messages minister to you, we hope that you would like or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, if you have a prayer request, if you want information or you want to make a donation to our ministry, you can do all of that at wingsoffaithministries.ca. And now, let's get back to our stories. It's around 1000 BCE. We're at the end of King Solomon's reign over Israel. We're in his twilight years. Now, the Bible tells us that in his latter years, King Solomon kind of turned away from the Hebrew God Yahweh and began serving the gods of the nations that surrounded Israel, gods like Shemaz and Astarte and Molech. So his heart turned away from God. While this was all going on, Solomon was involved in a bunch of reconstruction projects in the city of Jerusalem. And a young man named Jeroboam, he's an accomplished young man, and he distinguishes himself as a foreman in the work crews that are working for King Solomon. But even though Jeroboam is an accomplished young man and has been a standout worker and foreman, he also has come to be bitter about the way Solomon conducts business, especially concerning his labor force. And so one day, Jeroboam is leaving his work in the city of Jerusalem. He walks out into the country and he runs into a prophet named Ahijah. So Ahijah takes him off the beaten track to a secret place. And Ahijah is wearing a cloak. And he tears the cloak into 12 pieces. And he says to the man Jeroboam, pick out 10 pieces. And Jeroboam does so. And then Ahijah hits him with this prophecy. He said, because of Solomon's behavior in his latter years, Yahweh, the Hebrew God, intends to take 12 or 10 tribes away from Solomon and give it to Jeroboam. Now, this won't happen in Solomon's reign. It will happen during his son's reign. But the prophet Ahijah goes on to tell Jeroboam that if Jeroboam will faithfully serve the God Yahweh, that Yahweh will allow him to rule over Israel during his lifetime and even create for him a dynasty, so that he will have sons ruling after him. And all he has to do is to continue to be obedient to the God Yahweh. Jeroboam ends up running away from Jerusalem because Solomon finds out about all this, and Jeroboam heads to Egypt to go into exile for a while. In the meantime, Solomon passes away, and his son Rehoboam comes to the throne. Rehoboam has to decide how he wants to govern the nation of Israel. And so he consults with some advisors. The older advisors tell him that he should be gentle with the people, that he should lighten the load on the labor force and serve the people. While the people of his age, Rehoboam's age, give him actually the opposite advice and tell him to be more meaner than his dad was toward the people. While all this is happening, the people of Israel called Jeroboam back from hiding in Egypt. So he returns, and there's a giant meeting held with the entire land of Israel at the place called Shechem. It is there that Rehoboam will release his intents to the people. And as prophesied by the prophet Ahijah, 10 tribes rebel against Rehoboam, and they decide they're going to follow Jeroboam and make him king. And so the word of the Lord through the prophet Ahijah is fulfilled. God's promise comes true, and he becomes king over 10 of the tribes. Only Judah and the little tribe of Benjamin will stay loyal to Rehoboam. Well, what happens next is almost unbelievable. As Jeroboam is king, his insecurities start rising up. He knows that all the religious Jewish festivals are going to be held in the city of Jerusalem. And so he begins to second guess the word of the Lord to him. He thinks to himself, if these people go back to these festivals 3 or 4 times a year to Jerusalem, I'm going to lose their loyalty. And they'll end up turning on me, and they'll end up killing me and my family, and they'll go back to being one Israel under Rehoboam. And so he almost talks himself out of the word of the Lord. He then goes to advisors who only reinforce his insecurities, and they give him advice that instead of allowing the people to return to Jerusalem, he should make his own gods that they can serve and have their own festivals as a separate country. And so he sets up calf idols in both the cities of Bethel and in a non-named place in the tribe of Dan. This goes on for a certain period of time, when all of a sudden now we have our second character. He's not given a name, he's only given a title as the man of God. This man of God lives in Judah, but he's asked by God to go up to Israel, to the high place at Bethel, and to pronounce judgment on the temple there, or the high place. He's told, though, some very strict commands. Number 1, he's told where to go, what to say, but he's also told, while you're in Israel, you are not allowed to eat or drink, and you cannot take the road back that you traveled on to get there. Very strict, specific instructions. Well, the man of God goes to Bethel, and he pronounces judgment on the altar that Jeroboam has made, these calf altars in Bethel. Then he says, as a sign, the altar right now is going to be split, and the ashes of the burnt sacrifices of this altar are going to fall out. Now, King Jeroboam is there when the man of God pronounces this prophecy. Jeroboam reaches out his hand to grab the prophet as he's making this pronouncement, when all of a sudden his hand almost becomes paralyzed, his hand and arm, and it stiffens and he can't move it. He then turns to the prophet and says, "Can you please intercede to Yahweh for me, for my arm and hand?" The prophet does so, and his arm and hand is restored to normal. But the altar breaks in two, and the ashes pour out as a sign of a judgment that's coming upon Jeroboam and Israel for these new calf altars they have made. The man of God, after this pronouncement, now heads home, taking another road, just as he was commanded. But two witnesses who were at this at the calf altar, run home and tell their dad about what just happened. Their dad was an old prophet. He said, "Which way did the man of God take?" His sons tell him. And so the old prophet saddles up a donkey and runs after the man of God. He finds him sitting under a tree. And he says to the man of God, "I want you to come home with me, and you can eat and drink at my place." The man of God tells the old prophet, "I can't do that. I've been commanded that I cannot eat or drink or take the same way home in which I came, and I've got to follow the Lord's command." But the old prophet says to him, "Well, I'm a prophet too, and an angel appeared to me and told me to get you and bring you back to my place so you can eat and drink." The man of God believes him and returns to the prophet's home. While they're at the home, the prophet rebukes the man of God, saying, "You failed to keep the word of the Lord, and therefore you will not return home." The man of God leaves the prophet's house, and as he's on his way home, he is mauled by a lion. The man of God dies there. The old prophet finds out about it, retrieves him, and buries him in one of his own tombs. Two very strange stories, but all of them have the same common thread. And that thread is that two men were talked out of what God had directed them to do. Jeroboam, as a person, had everything going for him, a gifted and accomplished person. The word of the Lord came to him and promised him a strong rulership and a dynasty to follow him. And yet, his own insecurities and his advisors talked him out of God's plan for him. And then the man of God who pronounced judgment on Jeroboam is talked out of what God had directed him to do. Both men's lives were derailed because they simply couldn't follow the directives God had given them. These stories echo the whole theme, kind of the Old Testament. Right from Adam and Eve and that story in the garden, we find that people are talked out of what God reveals to them, God's directives for them. And because they're talked out of them, they lose God's plan and purpose for their life. They never reach the potential God had for them. It is so easy sometimes to find ourselves led away from the path God has for us. It can be our own insecurities. It can be people talking us out of what we know God has spoken to us. Both the man of God and King Jeroboam I knew clearly what God had called them to do, and yet they allowed their own insecurities or other people to talk them out of God's best for them. It's a lesson and it's a thought that we really need to take heart of. As Paul said, it's a lesson for us to watch our hearts and minds, lest we get led astray from the path that God's called us to. Listen, enjoy your coffee, have a good day, and we'll see you again next week.